The kitchen light flickered overhead, casting long shadows across the linoleum. Ethan watched his mother scrub the last of the copper pots, her hands red from the soapy water. Her voice was a low, tired hum in the quiet house. "Remember your place, Eli. Mr. Hayes is letting you stay as a favor. Don't cause trouble for Alexander." Eli, just 5, nodded solemnly. He understood the word place without knowing its meaning. It was a weight in his small chest. Alexander Hayes existed in a different world, one of sunlight and sprawling green lawns. Eli first saw him from the doorway of the staff quarters, a boy with hair the color of wheat and eyes that seemed too calm, too knowing for a child. Alexander turned, saw the smaller boy peeking, and simply said, "Come here." And Eli went. He always went. The Hayes estate in upstate New York was a kingdom, and Alexander was its prince from the start. At the private academy where a semester's tuition could buy a house, he was the undisputed center. Tall for his age, with a quiet confidence that drew others like a magnet. Older boys, bulky in their football jackets, called him Xander with a tone of respect. Eli was the housekeeper's son, brought along because Mrs. Hayes thought her own son was too serious, too studious. A playmate to distract him. At first, Eli was terrified of the gleaming toys, the art on the walls, the food that appeared like magic. He sat on the floor while Alexander sat on the sofa. He never reached for anything unless it was offered. But he was a child, and loneliness is a powerful glue. Within days, he was trailing after Alexander, a silent shadow. He'd watch, a strange heat coiling in his stomach as other children, sons of bankers, daughters of senators, flocked around Alexander, laughing at his jokes, vying for his attention. Eli would think fiercely that he wouldn't be his friend anymore. But then Alexander would glance over, a slight smile on his face, and call Eli, "Come here." And Eli would run, his earlier resentment forgotten. One afternoon, a boy with ruddy cheeks sneered as Alexander handed Eli a piece of fudge. "Does your maid's kid need you to feed him too, Xander?" Eli's face burned. "I'm not hungry," he mumbled, turning away. He hated them all in that moment. His mother's nightly lectures continued. Respect, obedience, gratitude. The words became a part of his skeleton. By the time they were teenagers at the same prestigious day school, sharing classes, that skeleton began to ache. Adolescence brought a keen awareness of the invisible lines that separated them. Alexander was effortlessly brilliant, his grades perfect, his demeanor a blend of easy grace and unshakable authority. Eli worked himself to exhaustion to stay in the advanced track, a constant, simmering envy his secret fuel. Alexander remained kind, maddeningly, impeccably kind. At a pool party at the Hayes summer home, Eli watched as a senior, a boy with sculpted features and nervous eyes, pulled Alexander aside near the hedges. Eli, retrieving a towel, caught fragments. "Just think about it, Xander. It's not wrong." Alexander's reply was calm, devoid of malice but utterly final. "I'm not interested."
"I'm sorry."
The other boy looked shattered. Alexander walked away without a backward glance. Something shifted inside Eli that day. A door he hadn't known was locked rattled in its frame. The summer before college, acceptance letters to the same Ivy League university secured, they were at the Hayes Hamptons property. Eli had drunk too much cheap beer, his head swimming. Alexander half carried him to the guest house. The details blurred, the rough texture of the rug against his cheek, the distant sound of the ocean, the solid warmth of Alexander's shoulder. He remembered fingers, his own, clumsy and bold, tangling in Alexander's shirt, a mumbled, incoherent challenge. He remembered the taste of salt and something uniquely Alexander as he pressed his mouth clumsily against his. A shock of contact, then nothing. Alexander had gently, firmly, disentangled him, his expression unreadable. "You're drunk, Eli. Go to sleep." The next morning, over pancakes in the sun-drenched kitchen, Alexander was his usual self. Polite, attentive, as if the feverish collision had been a dream. Eli, nursing a headache, felt a reckless defiance rise. "About last night," he started, his voice too casual. Alexander looked up from his tablet. "You were impaired. It's forgotten." His tone left no room for discussion. But Eli couldn't leave it. A week later, in the library of the main house, he did it again. Sober, deliberate. He stepped into Alexander's space, closed the distance, and kissed him. It was less clumsy this time. A silent, pointed question. Alexander went very still. For a long moment, he didn't move. Then his hands came up, not to push away, but to settle heavily on Eli's shoulders. He broke the kiss, his gaze dark and intense. "Eli," he said, his voice low, "do you understand what you're doing?" "No," Eli whispered, the truth of it thrilling and terrifying. "But you do, don't you?" Alexander studied him. The quiet of the library was absolute, broken only by the hum of the central air. A lifetime of careful composure seemed to balance on a knife's edge in his eyes. Then, almost imperceptibly, it fractured. He pulled Eli back in. It was a surrender. Eli felt a savage, triumphant joy. He had done it. He had touched the untouchable, found a flaw in the pristine marble. The perfect Alexander Hayes wanted him was unraveling for him. College in Boston provided freedom and a cover. They shared a dorm room, a fact Alexander had arranged with quiet efficiency. In public, they were childhood friends. In private, Alexander was a revelation. The controlled demeanor melted away, replaced by a startling, possessive hunger. He would pin Eli against the dorm room door after everyone left, kissing him until they were both breathless. He'd murmur things in the dark, raw and explicit, that made Eli's face flush with heat and a strange pride. "I want to ruin you," Alexander would say against his skin, and Eli would arch into the touch, thinking, "You already have. I ruined you first." But reality had a gravity of its own. Eli's mother visited during their junior year. She saw enough, a lingering touch, a look that held too much to understand. The confrontation in her hotel room was quiet and devastating. She didn't yell. She cried, her shoulders shaking. "What about your life, Eli? What happens when he moves on? What do you do then?" Her fear was a mirror to his own secret dread. The jealousy that had started it all now curdled into anxiety. He saw Alexander's future, the corporate empire, the society weddings, the legacy, and saw himself as a footnote, a secret rebellion eventually outgrown. The pressure crystallized when Alexander's mother requested a meeting. In a quiet tea room, she was polite, regretful. Alexander's father has certain expectations. This path complicates things immensely. For both of you, she didn't threaten. She didn't need to. Your mother has decided to pursue other opportunities. I think it's for the best. The ground fell away. His mother, losing the job she'd held for decades because of him. The guilt was a physical chokehold. He broke it off a month later. He used the only weapon he had, distance. He moved out, found a studio apartment, threw himself into his internship. When Alexander came, frantic and confused, Eli was cold. He made up stories about seeing other people, about needing something normal. He watched the hurt slash across Alexander's usually impassive face and felt a perverse mix of pain and power. Alexander stopped coming. The silence was worse than the arguing. Months passed. Eli graduated, moved into a slightly better apartment. He told himself he was building a life. But the city felt gray without Alexander's gravitational pull. He'd see a tall blonde man on the street and his heart would lurch. He'd hear a laugh and turn, hoping. Then, one evening, Alexander was just there. Leaning against the wall outside Eli's building, hands in the pockets of a wool coat. He looked older, sharper. "Have dinner with me," he said. It wasn't a question, but it wasn't a command either. It was a plea thinly veiled. Eli, against every instinct of self-preservation, said yes. The dinner was at Alexander's penthouse, a a space of cool minimalist lines and breathtaking views of the city skyline. Alexander cooked, something simple and elegant. He poured wine. He talked about mundane things, mutual acquaintances, a new art exhibit. The normalcy was a sedative. Eli drank more than he meant to, the wine smooth and heavy on his tongue. "I never liked you for your family's money." Eli heard himself slur, the confession bitter. "I liked you because you were you, and I hated that I did." Alexander watched him, an odd smile touching his lips. "That's a relief," he said softly. "The wine would have been a waste otherwise." Eli didn't understand. The room began to tilt, the lights softening into blurry halos. The last thing he felt was Alexander's arms catching him, lifting him with ease. He woke in a bed that wasn't his. The room was unfamiliar, all neutral tones and expensive, silent air. His head throbbed. When he tried to sit up, a soft chime sounded. He looked down. A slender, elegant chain was fastened around his ankle, a tiny silver bell attached. Panic, cold and sharp, cleared the fog for a moment. He stumbled to the door. Locked. The windows, floor to ceiling, revealed a dizzying drop to a manicured garden far below. He was in a tower. Alexander entered sometime later carrying a tray. He was calm, dressed in casual clothes, as if this were any other morning. "You're awake. You need to eat." "What is this?" Eli's voice was a scrape. "This," Alexander said, setting the tray down, "is us having a conversation without you running away." His tone was gentle, but his eyes were not. They were the eyes of a stranger, focused, intense, stripped of their usual polite filters. "You left me. You lied to me. We need to talk about why." The days blurred. Alexander was sometimes the boy he knew. Tender, witty, bringing him books he loved, talking for hours about everything and nothing. He'd kiss Eli with a devastating sweetness that made Eli's chest ache. Other times, he was this new, unsettling entity. He'd speak of the future with a terrifying certainty, mapping out a life Eli had never dared imagine. He'd hold Eli tightly in the dark, palms splayed low on his stomach, voice dropping to a dreamy, obsessive whisper. "Imagine if you could. Imagine a part of you and me right here. Then you'd never think of leaving." It was absurd. It was insane. And a treacherous, hidden part of Eli thrilled at it. This was no longer about pulling Alexander down from a pedestal. This was about discovering the pedestal was an illusion, and the man beneath was far more complex, more dangerous, and more captivating than the ideal. Alexander's obsession was a mirror to his own. His control was an answer to Eli's chaos. But the fear was real too. The bell on his ankle was a constant reminder. He saw cameras, small and discreet, in the corners of the rooms. Alexander showed him files on a tablet, photos of Eli at his coffee shop, walking in the park, sitting in his old apartment. "I never stopped watching," Alexander said simply. "I needed to know you were safe." It was love, but love distilled into something potent and frightening. Eli realized with a jolt that he wasn't a prisoner of a madman. He was caught in the web of a love that refused to play by any rules but its own. And he had woven the first strands himself. The escape, when it came, was provided by Alexander's mother. She arrived while Alexander was handling a family emergency. She didn't speak, just opened the door and nodded toward a waiting car. Eli, his heart hammering, ran. He hid. He changed cities, used cash, tried to vanish. But Alexander's reach was long. A week later, a newspaper was delivered to his motel door, folded open to the society page. A photo of Alexander at a charity gala, his arm around a woman's waist. The caption was innocuous. The message was not. Eli stopped running. He went back to Boston to his old thesis advisor to finish his degree. At his final defense, Alexander was in the back of the lecture hall, looking every inch the young scion. He asked a question about Eli's work, his voice cool and professional. Eli answered, his own voice steady. The game had changed again. That night, Alexander stood in the hallway outside Eli's apartment door for an hour. Eli watched him on the security screen, a still figure in the poor lighting. Finally, he heard a sigh through the door.
Good night, Eli.
The sound of his name, spoken with such weary defeat, broke something. Eli opened the door. Alexander turned, hope and wariness battling in his eyes. You can't keep doing this, Eli said, his voice trembling. The chains, the watching, you can't. Alexander took a step closer. Then give me a reason not to. Give me a promise that isn't made to be broken. The truth finally surfaced, raw and unadorned. I was afraid you'd realize I wasn't worth it. That I'd be the mistake you'd regret. Alexander closed the distance, his hands coming up to frame Eli's face. The only mistake I ever made was letting you believe, for 1 second, that you could be anything less than everything to me. He searched Eli's eyes. The jealousy, the pushing, the running. I see it, Eli. I've always seen it. Your chaos matches my order. Your fire needs my control. Don't you understand? You didn't bend me. You met me, in the only place I could ever be real. The confession hung between them, dissolving the last of the pretense. The pursuit, the capture, the desperate measures, they weren't the acts of a saint corrupted. They were the language of a man who loved with the same ruthless intensity with which he did everything else. And Eli, who had loved from a place of envy and want, finally understood he was loved back with a totality that dwarfed his own. He stepped forward, into the circle of Alexander's arms. Okay, he whispered against his neck. Okay, what?
Okay, I'm yours.
A pause. But no more chains. A low laugh vibrated through Alexander's chest. You are the chain, Eli. You have been since you were 5 years old and followed me out of that kitchen. He held him tighter. And I am yours. Completely. Terribly. You win. Years later, at a friend's sprawling country wedding, Eli watched Alexander deftly shell a lobster for him, ignoring the good-natured ribbing from across the table. The friend, now a father himself, just shook his head with a smile. Some things never changed. Later, in the quiet of their own home, the city lights twinkling outside, Eli turned to him. The words came easily now, worn smooth by time and truth. I love you. You know that, right? Alexander pulled him close, his smile a quiet thing in the dim room. I know, he said, his voice sure and deep. It's the only thing I've ever been certain of. The kiss was a seal, a promise, an end and a beginning that had started in a sunlit kitchen a lifetime ago.